Hey everybody, Cajun Techie. So if you have been around the technology community any length of time, you've probably heard the term open source. In fact, I know a lot of you have heard the term because you've sent me emails about it. And a lot of you are confused because you don't understand what's the big deal about open source and why is everybody talking about it, really what open source is. And so I'm making this video to try to explain a little bit in simple terms why open source is important and what it is. So let's start off with what is open source. What is open source software? Well, obviously open source software is software, but it's a way of designing software that directly contradicts with the other way of designing software, which is proprietary closed source. Now let me give you two examples that may clarify things. Let's take an open source operating system like Linux and a closed source proprietary operating system like Windows. When you're running Windows on your computer, you are completely at the mercy of Microsoft. You have to trust that Microsoft does not snuck something into the system that's going to do something nefarious. Now, chances are they haven't, but you really don't know, and there's no real way for you to find out if they have or if they haven't. You can't go to Microsoft's website, download the source code to Windows, look through it, or have a programmer friend look through it or a team, and go, okay, so there's nothing bad going on here. Really, you don't know. You trust that nothing bad is going on because it would ruin Microsoft's reputation, but you really don't know, and there's no real way to find out. Now, if you run Windows, then, like I said, you're completely at the mercy of Microsoft. If you run Linux, you are at no one's mercy, and here's why. Let's say, for example, you want to go and get the latest version of Ubuntu, which is a Linux distribution. There are two ways that you can do that. The first, you can go and download a CD and install it on your system. Now, in that sense, you really are kind of at the mercy of Canonical, the people who make Ubuntu, because really it's a black box to you and you don't really have the source code. But here's where things get interesting. Because Ubuntu and because Linux is open source, at any time you want, you can go and get the source code to Ubuntu, and you can audit it, you can read it, you can have your friends read it, you can have your team read it, and most importantly, if you don't trust the black box you downloaded from Canonical, that CD that you downloaded, you can wipe it off of your system, compile Ubuntu completely from the source code that you've audited, and run a completely clean and trusted operating system on your computer. Now, that sounds pretty awesome, doesn't it? It means complete security. I mean, barring any bugs that may compromise security, but you're not at the mercy of the vendor. You don't have to beg the vendor to keep your privacy or to keep your security. You can do it yourself. Now let's look at security patching. Let's say that one day you're running Windows and you find a glaring security hole. I mean something so big that the NSA could just send an email to you and get a copy of all your files. You submit that. Now what are you going to do? The first thing you can do is you can submit a bug report to Microsoft, which is definitely not easy at all. But what happens if the version of Windows that you're running isn't supported by Microsoft anymore? Well, chances are that bug will never be fixed, ever. And there are actually several thousand bugs with an older version of Windows that will never be fixed because Microsoft doesn't support it anymore. Now, let's say that you are on a supported version of Windows that you find it. The same process goes, you submit your bug to Microsoft, and they may sit on it for months and sometimes even years before they decide to fix it. That compromises your security. In the meantime, there's absolutely nothing you can do to fix that bug. You can't go out and write code to fix that bug because you don't have the source code for the operating system that will allow you to change what needs to be changed to fix the bug. Now, there are ways that you can patch things in roundabout ways, but really, for serious vulnerabilities, there's not a whole lot you can do. Now, let's take Linux. You find that exact same bug in Linux. You go and you report the bug to the community, and one of two things are going to happen. Chances are someone in the community is going to write a patch within a couple of hours, and that's happened actually a few times. Someone reported a bug, it was fixed in a few hours, and sometimes even minutes. Or you are completely free to write the fix yourself. If you find a bug and you know how to fix it, then fix it and submit it to the community. In essence, the community is the company behind Linux. The community is the company that powers Linux. So you are not at the whim of anyone. You're a part of the community, and as such, you're able to fix things yourself. You're not having to wait for some large behemoth company to fix it. So as you can see, open source software presents several advantages over proprietary software. The most important advantage is trust. I often tell people who run Windows, I know a couple of people who run Windows, and they also run something like PGP to encrypt their email, and TrueCrypt to encrypt their hard disk, and different security software. And I always ask them, why do you do that? It's completely, you're giving yourself a false sense of security, because if your machine is not doing what it says it's doing, and you have no way of knowing that it is, how do you know any of the security that you're running means anything at all? And the truth is they don't, because they can inspect the code. They can say, I trust Microsoft, but that's all they can say. They can't really say, I can verify that I'm safe. They can't really say that I know that I'm safe. They can only say, I believe that I'm safe. Whereas with Linux, you can go and you can audit the source code, and you can know beyond a shadow of a doubt, beyond any question, that you're safe. Again, barring any undiscovered bugs in the code that would compromise security. And so, really, if you're running Windows, you really are putting yourself at risk. If you're running proprietary closed source software, you're putting yourself at risk. The only solution is open source software, and that's why I believe open source is so important, and that's why so many people believe it's important, and why you hear the religious wars around it all the time. Because while it's not a moral decision like people like Richard Stallman would have you believe, it's not a moral decision when you run Windows as opposed to Linux. It's just good common sense. Why would you expose yourself needlessly to any kind of security vulnerability or any kind of security question when you don't have to? And so I hope that clarifies a little bit of what open source is and why it's important, and it gives you a good idea of why you should be using it maybe. If you have any questions, I encourage you to send an email. There should be an email address displayed on the video now, or just leave something in the comments and I'd be happy to answer. Have a great day, and thanks for listening.